Fabulous. Well, welcome everyone, people filtering in for this afternoon session of Communicate. I hope you've had a good session on pitching audio content. So first up, an introduction to me. I am Connor Davies. I'm a youth officer with Avon Wildlife Trust, and I also am a producer and co-host of Planty Planty Zuzu, a podcast that I run with my fiance, where we design our dream zoo and botanical garden, and each week add a species of animal and plant to it. And so we kind of use that as a way of telling nature stories and talking about conservation, the amazing folklore of different animals as well, and kind of how we can package those stories into something a little bit different to the kind of the usual nature podcasts we get. And I'm thrilled today to be joined by three other people on the panel who have three different experiences of pitching and producing audio content and telling these nature stories in a kind of audio format. So before we hear from them for kind of a few provocations and a few kind of presentations, I'll just throw them just to introduce themselves in their own words. So if we go to Fergus Collins first.
Hello. Thanks for joining us. I'm Fergus. I'm the host, or the creator and host of BBC Countryfile magazine's Plodcast, which is a weekly immersive adventure in nature, which has been going since 2019. So yeah, and a separate little podcast on Fridays, which is just pure sound. So that's me.
Fabulous, thank you, Fergus. And David Delahaye.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me here. I'm an ecological sound artist and a musician and a current PhD researcher as well in freshwater soundscapes. And yeah, that's me.
Fabulous, thank you, David. And finally, Penny Southgate.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I'm a radio producer in community radio with the station BCFM in Bristol. And I'm also a climate campaigner as well.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. So I'm going to pass over in a second so we can hear from each of our speakers kind of in turn about the work that they do and kind of the audio content they produce, but also then they might have pitched to them as well. But throughout this, if you have any questions, we're going to save those for the end after we've heard from each of our speakers. There'll be a chance for a Q&A for a little while. So if you've got any questions for any of our speakers as they're talking, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A, which you'll find down at the bottom of your kind of Zoom platform. So that's a dedicated Q&A space. So pop any questions you've got in there, or if you can't quite find that, pop them in the chat and I'll make sure I check there as well when it comes to questions at the end. But yeah, please do keep putting those in while the speakers are on, and we'll ask the ones to our speakers a little bit later. So first off, we're going over to you, Fergus.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, yes, I'm going to give you a bit of background about the podcast. If you've never listened to the podcast, well, see me after school, but I'll tell you a little bit more. It wasn't called the Plodcast to begin with. It was an experiment that I started as when I was editor of BBC Countryfile magazine back in 2018. I began thinking about a more immediate way of connecting the written page, the Countryfile TV program, with sort of conveying the wonders of the natural world. So a way of taking people into it. I thought about what I loved doing, why I go out in nature, perhaps with head out to listen to a wood warbler in the local woods, or head out to explore that hill fort on that little hillock 5 miles away. And I thought, would actually walking out with a recorder, recording these adventures and whatever happens along the way, would that make good audio? And so that was how I started this out. And I guess this journey will sort of give you an idea of what sort of things of my passion for it and what I'm sort of looking for when I look for people to pitch things to me. So I started out thinking, the first ever episode was a trip to Watership Down, which does exist. It's not just a sort of fantasy rabbit warfare tale. It's a hill in Hampshire, which I wandered out one cold January morning, climbed this downland, explored the amazing landscape there, had lots of adventures on the way, didn't find any rabbits, but found 2 hares, which I recorded the sound of their feet running around me. And so that made this immediate sort of And then I got a friend of mine who still works with me on the Plodcast, Hannah, to record reading from the book. As the rabbits arrive at Watership Down, I arrive at Watership Down, you get her lovely reading. And suddenly we created something. I made 12 episodes, little series, made a couple more series that year, and it began to, and traction, got a bit of traction. And it wasn't just me walking, but generally I was looking to find beautiful moments in nature. And it might be a good opportunity if someone could play the nightingale recording. One of these things, we might hear this little bit of nightingale sound. Can we hear it? Well, anyway, I was hunting for nightingales for a long time to be part of the Plodcast. Finally found them at the Knepp estate in Sussex, which is very famous. And it's that sort of questing and sort of almost like setting out on a great adventure to find something. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Now, it's not just me on my own. I take guests out. There are walks and talks with, and the whole idea is to get away from the studio. So it's not a podcast contained in the studio. When I started out, I did use something that we used Skype. Do you remember that? And we were in the studios, but it didn't quite work for me. I couldn't get my nature head into the studio. So I take guests out on walks and talks. And so I infiltrate guest walks with solo walks. And I sort of find that being outside, I think everyone who loves nature and is outside, you're walking together side by side, you talk more easily, you talk more openly. I ask better questions. In fact, I'm in a room now and it's not my home territory. I need to be out that window there. Anyway, we've had lots of great guests, and I'm not sure this will work, but one of my most recent guests was the folk singer Johnny Flynn, and I did record a little video of when we recorded together, and it was just a purely magical moment. Oh, here we go. We might. This is recorded on the River Lee in London. Might be working. I hope so. Anyway, that was a really brilliant.
Just need sound, don't we?
Yeah. Oh, you'll have to listen to the Plodcast itself. Now that's a good lesson to subscribe right away. So it's this blend of guests. It's a blend of outdoors adventures, getting away from the studio, but it's a big undertaking to be outdoors the whole time. I need help sometimes. I have Plodcast friends, freelancers who help me with interviews and recordings, but I could do with more. So that's what we're here to talk about. Over to you, Connor.
Can't hear you.
Absolute classic. 3 years into doing online events and I'm still forgetting to unmute. Thank you so much for that, Fergus. That was really lovely. And yeah, we'll try and pop any links and stuff in the chat, I think. So if any of the videos didn't work for people, we can hopefully make sure they hear those after the session as well and can kind of look at those separately. But yeah, thank you so much for that. Up next, I'm going to come over to you, David.
Great, just remember to unmute myself. Yeah, so when I was asked to take part in this panel, I think I initially turned it down because I don't really pitch my audio content very much at all. But however, I do love to share the outputs of my creative endeavors and tell stories through sound, which is the medium that I work with. And yeah, with this in mind, from a new video that I put together for a science conference. So I'm going to try and share my screen and see if this works. Fingers crossed. I remember to share sound as well. Here we go. Oh, sorry. Okay, hopefully you can see something. Probably back screen right now. For the International Pond Conference 2024, I've got 10 minutes, so I'd like to give the majority of that time to the most important delegate of all, the pond. Rather than talk for or about them, this video offers a chance for them to talk for themselves. So I'm David Delahaye. I'm a sound artist, musician and researcher. My artistic practice focuses on underwater soundscapes in freshwater habitats. I'm particularly fascinated by pond sounds. This led to the creation of sonic pond dipping, which is an activity that offers a curiosity-driven, arts-based approach to learning about sonic ecologies. It asks, what can we learn simply by listening? My primary tool is the hydrophone, and these instruments allow us to listen beyond the human and beneath the surface of the water, and offer a way to reconnect with natural habitats on our doorstep. During this short video, we'll take a journey into the sounds of urban and rural ponds, from reclaimed industrial sites to allotment ponds, and explore the sheer variety of sounds that there are in these environments. All the materials here have been gathered from sonic pond dipping workshops that I've run in the past, and showcase the contribution that ponds have made to people. Okay, so stop sound. You have to watch the rest of the video to hear those underwater sounds. But yeah, I made this video for a science conference, and as you can probably tell, I'm not a scientist, but I think that's in some way where my potential lies. You see, I began making this style of video and sound art a few years ago when I first got interested in underwater soundscapes, and by trying to establish what was making these sounds, I ended up in this kind of in a mountain of journal papers and scientific articles, and it seemed a ton of graphs and data about. I understand that the research is really important, but it kind of misses the point that if we want to encourage conservation awareness and learn to protect something, we have to learn to care for it and develop an empathy for the natural worlds. And this shift in perspective is where I think the arts are really help. Making more audio works based on my hydrophone recordings, and contacted other friends and artists to collaborate with me. I started running listening workshops and curating exhibitions and sound installations, local art centres, nation groups. I even managed to blag my way into some quite large international symposiums. I went to Davos earlier this year and to share my experiences. And I secretly think the conference committee misread my application and thought I was going to offer some new, but there we go. It's going to help me to tell stories that carry my singular message, which is that we need to give a voice to the unheard, and it's time to listen beyond human perspectives. Much of this work is done off my own volition, I guess, and you could say that my pitching method discussed is kind of more of a passive stuff out there, and I hope it encourages curiosity and people to see and hear the world in new ways. And I'm really grateful when, through the magic of human connection, I'm able to have the opportunity to present works and speak about my ideas at events like this. So yeah, that's it from me.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, David. That was really, really interesting to hear. And yeah, again, there's links in the chat if you want to hear the rest of that video from David and want to actually hear some of those kind of audio recordings of the ponds as well. And if you've got any questions for David or Fergus that have already spoken, please do pop them in the Q&A down at the bottom of the kind of in the menu on the Zoom tab. Please do pop your questions in the Q&A panel just so we can put those to the guests after our final speaker, that I'm going to go over to now. Over to you, Penny.
Hi, thanks very much. Every now and then, David, you cut out, so I missed some of the stuff that you said. But I just want to say, first and foremost, David's website was so brilliant that I actually reached out to him earlier this year for something I was working on, which I'm just about to tell you about. Could I possibly have the first slide, please? Because I couldn't share my screen before. Thank you. I'll just wait for that to come up. Basically just tell you a tiny little bit about me while we're waiting for this slide to come up. I worked in television for quite a long time, and then when my children were growing up, went to work at a school and joined BCFM community radio about 10 years ago. And I'm here basically to bang the drum for community radio and say, you people out there listening, maybe wondering where to reach out to if you want to be communicators. And I just want to say, bear in mind community radio, because it's a fantastic place to be. For the first sort of 7 years at BCFM, I was involved with a show for older people, older listeners. And then when I sort of got into climate campaigning some years ago, I then switched because I thought, okay, I have a voice on radio. I'm always criticising the mainstream media for not delivering a strong enough message or not doing enough. So I thought, right, I have a voice. So started this environmental show, One Love, One Planet, which started life as being more about sort of climate stuff, but slowly, and this is what's been so interesting listening to Fergus and David, it sort of morphed into talking much more about nature, actually, which is the fundamental element of all of this. So it's a very broad show talking about all sorts of different subjects, because of course it touches on everything. And then after about a year, could I possibly have the next slide, please? Slide number 2. I wanted to do something a bit more during the COP talks because they were taking place in Glasgow and there was a bit more of a buzz about things. So I asked our station manager at BCFM if we could, if every single show could do something about climate and nature. And so we started this thing called Our Earth Week. Lots of shows took part. It was really good. Very wide range of content because every show is different. And then, so that was 3 years ago. Last year, I decided to up the ante and make it go nationwide. So you'll see the map, bottom left. That's the map of all the stations from 2023 that took part. So you'll see it's all across the country. Again, every station is different. So every station was approaching this in their own way. And it just worked really well. And we were nominated for an ARIAS award. And out of it grew a network. We needed somewhere central to gather people who were interested in radio, sound work, and climate and nature. So if I could have the 3rd slide, please. Oh, yes, no, it's the blue one. Thank you. The blue one, thanks. So this is from the picture, this is from the front of the Community Radio Environment Network, which is what grew out of Our Earth Week and is basically a gathering place online. It's very new for producers, podcasters, artists, musicians to gather and find each other. Anyone who's working at the sort of intersection of sound and nature and climate. So it's very this screen, but it's the Community Radio Network, so worth checking out. So if I could have the next slide, please. Yeah, in terms of community radio, it's definitely worth, if you're sort of setting out and if you've got ideas, Actually, sorry, it was the other slide. I think it's like, yes, thank you. The first thing is to, admittedly, we're all volunteers, but basically the more you put in, the more you get out. And the beauty of it is that we don't have the constraints that mainstream media have. I worked in the BBC and I went through the BBC commissioning process, and it's obviously full of constraints which you don't have in community radio. So it's a really good place to pitch your ideas. So the best thing that you could do is find your local station. If you're working full time, if you could devote a bit of time at the weekend, because I realise not everyone can afford to spend a lot of time doing this, but apply to them, find the show that looks most like you, ask if you can go on it just to observe or to maybe produce a feature or something for them. Community radio stations want content, they want volunteers. So they will be very, very happy to hear from you. And as long as you're prepared to be flexible, then, and also do the training, be reliable, be professional, you could possibly stand to get a lot out of it. So if I could just have the final slide, that'd be great. Thank you. So, and my advice to you about if you're pitching content, some of this is really obvious. If you find it boring, other people are likely to find it, or other, if you're not really excited by it, it's highly likely that other people won't be as well. But my main 2 points here are, as I was just saying, that don't sort of censor yourself when thinking about what you want to talk about or what you want to pitch. Because community radio can be, we tend to work in the opposite way to mainstream media. At the BBC, things had to be sort of almost proven before they actually were broadcast. You know, everyone needed to be happy that it was going to work. In community radio, things are a bit more rough and ready. So people are prepared to give you a chance. And then if it doesn't work, people will take you off air. So yeah, don't censor yourself. But the other thing is, even though it's community radio, you need to be professional. So do your work, do your research, and don't just assume that because it's professional community radio that it kind of doesn't matter, because it absolutely does. But yes, I would say do bear them in mind, because it's a chance for you to try things out in a really creative environment. In our Earth Week, for example, we covered nature in so many different ways, including David's wonderful recordings of the sounds of seals underwater, which people absolutely loved. Just so much content, it's difficult to go into, but if you want to find out more, you can on the Kren website. So yeah, I just think, yeah, give it a go if you're getting sort of barred from finding any opportunities elsewhere. So that's it from me, done.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Penny. So now that we've heard from our three speakers, we will open up for a Q&A. So if you've got any extra questions, pop them in the chat, pop them in the Q&A. I've got both of those up so I can check both of those places for any questions that we've got coming through. I've seen a couple have come in for David, which we'll come to in just a second. But to kick us off, I've got one that I tend to ask on my podcast whenever we have guests on. And that's, what piece of work are each of you? I'll ask each of you in turn. Which piece of work, which piece of content that you've produced through kind of your stuff are you proudest of? And actually to kind of talk about pitching content and things like, how did that piece of content come about? What were the steps to kind of creating it, or to pitching it, or to kind of making sure it happened? So who wants to come in first? Has anyone got anything straight away?
Well, I mean, gosh, there's so many. That's the difficulty. There's so many to choose from. With the Plodcast, it's kind of rewarding when I hear from people about how much effect it's had on them in terms of, particularly during lockdown, it took people out of their confined situations, and I've had a lot of feedback from many people And one of the reasons we've been so successful is because so many people aren't able to get out. So I kind of think, although having the guests along is wonderful, and it builds the sort of it builds the kind of ecosphere of the podcast, gets us known, and people broadcast through their social media. I think some of them that I'm most proud of, I think actually the one I'm most proud is when I looked on a map and I saw a bit of Gothic writing, and it said Holy Well up on an obscure Welsh mountain, not particularly well visited. And I thought, I'm going to walk there and see what that Holy Well is. And it was a miserable, rainy day. And I took my recorder and it poured with rain. And I thought, no, this is the feeling so many of us have on walks. There wasn't a lot of wildlife around either. And I plodded and I slid and I got lost and I found keep out signs and barbed wire. And I made it to this well in the pouring rain. And it was a beautiful little pool in a sort of a carved stone surrounding basin, and just in this sort of glade, pouring rain. And then weirdly, the sun came out afterwards, and I had just enough energy and just enough battery left to kind of have this revelatory moment. And it was, and when I listened back, and then I was able to do a bit of research and tell the story of the well, which had this incredible tale of how the landowner blocked it up and stopped the locals from using the water. And in the end, the finished thing was just by chance, by looking on a map, turned into this great thing. And I've had so much lovely feedback about it. I think probably from my own sort of heartfelt, rather miserable journey that ended with this lovely moment. And then the chat in the studio after about this horrible landowner. It was just a perfect little, I can't for the life of me remember the number it is, but I will look it up and put it on the chat for because it is a special one, and it's quite an early one.
Amazing. That sounds fantastic. I look forward to going back and listening to that one, Fergus. Thank you. Who's next? Should we go to Penny?
Yeah, this one has this has thrown me, I have to
No
say,
worries.
because it's really because One Love One Planet is a magazine show, so it's full of different elements, and it's actually really, because the one that I was most proud of is actually slightly different. I spoke to I had a conversation with a man who rescued refugees from the Mediterranean, and it was his account of his work, and it was just very, very moving. And I had no idea that it was going to be quite so moving. So it's not strictly related to nature as such. But there was, I suppose I'm proud of our Earth Week as a thing. It's become a thing. And it's very, it's something that people can make their own in their own way, however they want to approach it, whatever their response to nature is. And this year's theme was the sound of the wild, and it was the most amazing theme. I mean, we had David stuff, we had other musicians and sound recordists talking about their work, to produce these sounds in their music. And so there was another woman, an American musician, who was describing how she recorded the sound of a glacier in Nepal, and the way she told the story was really magical as well. So things like that. Or we had just something very simple like the mystery sound quiz, which is something much more popular that the stations really loved. So I just think it's something that it means different things to different people, and it seems to have caught people's imagination. So I'm hoping, and it's also the first time that community stations came together. I had no idea. It had never happened before. So I suppose our Earth Week is really the thing I'm most proud of.
Yeah, fantastic. It sounds like it was a really big movement and quite a culture shift to bring all of those organisations together as well. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much. And finally, David.
Well, I guess I should say my proudest moment is the recording of those seals, because Fergus and Penny have both used them. And it was an amazing trip. I joined the Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Trust in, I think it was 2019, and it was just great to go out to conduct some citizen science about cetaceans. But obviously, I took all my hydrophones and gear with me and made some recordings out there and yeah, of many things. But the underwater seals was particularly amazing and sharing. You know, actually, what I'm proudest mostly when I get to share the experience of underwater listening in real time. You know, I got to sit in my cabin with the skipper and the first mate and everyone else on board as well. But I thought that they'd be familiar with these sounds, and they really weren't. So to see their kind of awe and excitement to hear all these underwater sounds was really special. But my proudest moment has to be dad moment, I'm afraid. So when my son, who's now 6, he was 2 at the time, he woke up really early one morning, and we went outside because it was spring. It was during lockdown, and it went outside the door, and it was beautifully quiet, and the dawn chorus was in full swing. And his reaction, he didn't really have any words at the time, which was perfect. I had my recorder. Obviously, I had my recorder at 4 in the morning. Why wouldn't I? And yeah, I've just made a lovely recording of him and his excitement at hearing the sounds of the birds. And that recording actually won. There's a competition called Sound of the Year, and he won Best Listener for that year from that recording. It's really, really special. So it's a proud dad moment, really.
Of course, get him started young. Oh, that's
Yeah.
fantastic, though. Fantastic. Now we've had a few come through in the Q&A. So there's a few for you, Dave, actually. So I'll start with those. So first up, have you done any work comparing the audio of healthy ponds versus degraded or polluted ponds, or is that something that you're looking into or have done any work around?
No, I mean I have recorded in just out of curiosity in various ponds. I recorded there's quite a polluted pond just near me. I say polluted because it's got tires and rubbish and stuff in it almost all the time. Even when you go and pick it out, it still seems to magically appear. So whatever. But yeah, I'm curious about whether the soundscape of that is different to what a healthy pond. But the terms I guess are kind of confusing. So but sonically, actually, both have been very, very productive. I'd like to do. I'm kind of interested in a minute of doing a kind of gradient check on the sounds between urban and rural soundscapes of ponds and seeing if there's a difference between them. Which, yes, I don't know which would be more polluted even because of all the surface runoff and stuff in rural habitats. So the positioning of ponds. I don't know, there's a lot to explore there. I'd like to do more of it, but I don't really know where to start, to be honest.
No, fantastic.
Come on the podcast. Come on the podcast again, then, David. Sounds like we should definitely do another.
Yeah, we'll go for a walk together and have a listen to some ponds. I was thinking that when you mentioned the well.
Sorry,
We'll
can
come
I
to the well.
just say something as well here that you've made me think of, David? Alex H. Duncan is a musician who records sounds, who makes music using plant signals, and he has looked at different plants that are under stress or not, and the different signals and sounds that come from them. So people might want to check out his work as well. And yeah, I was trying to put you in touch, David, with Alex, because your work definitely
there's been quite a lot
intersects, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say with the sound, a bit of research in plant bioacoustics about how, the sounds can correlate to the stress patterns, which is it's quite incredible. But to realize that plants even make a sound is one of the most extraordinary things that people get out of the sonic pond dipping experience. To really realize that these things are alive. So.
Fantastic. And another one coming straight at you, David, kind of linked into the kind of, I guess, different ponds of different types. Sam has asked, have you ever worked with ecologists to actually determine the species that you're hearing? And is there a potential for that to be a way of kind of surveying for or species composition versus something like eDNA, for example?
Yeah, I've been wanting to do this. It's been on my mind for years. The idea, this is where my pitching is rubbish, you see, because I've suggested this idea to loads of places, botanical gardens, different nature reserves, to see if we can go and just somewhere where there's a lab kind of situation where we could try and identify species in isolation. But just no one. I don't know why no one seems interested. So, or maybe they just don't have the resources or something. I think there is a real. It's funny that you mentioned the connection with eDNA, because I've just the other day setting up a new project for next year, which with a group who are developing a new hydrophone, which we're hoping to use in that combination of eDNA and soundscape studies to understand species richness and diversity. So we've got sound isn't going to be a cure-all for this, because not everything makes sound. But I think as a complementary approach, as an experience for the layperson like me, it's really important, because it can help create those connections to freshwater bodies. But if you know anyone, I'm there. I'd love to do it.
There we go. There's a piece of future work. So if anyone can help with that, get in touch. That sounds exciting. Fantastic. Thank you for that question, Sam. Next up, we've got quite an interesting question in the chat. Is mainly for Fergus and David, this one says, but how did the ASMR boom kind of impact on the reception of your work, especially, I guess, for Fergus and David, because things like walking around crunching leaves and things like that, and kind of the noises of pond kind of, have a definite ASMR kind of element to them. Did you see any impact of that, and is that tapering off now? And if it is tapering, what do you think's going to come next? What's on the up?
I can answer that in a little way. We have a separate we call it Sound Escape, for want of a better phrase, and it just stuck. But it comes out on Fridays and is introduced by my colleague Hannah, who has a really beautiful velvety Welsh. Well, not Welsh. It's just a lovely, lovely voice, and the essence of it is 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes of recording of natural sounds. So in spring, it's bird song, all the way through to sort of August, and then that dies away. But whatever we find along the way, and I've just been out recording snowfall here, which was in South Wales. It's very, very popular, and we've got a different audience for it. It hasn't dropped off at all, but I don't know. It's not the prime. It was just an extra thing that I started doing during lockdown, because I had this extra time, and it's become part of our package, I suppose, of offerings. But a lot of people, I know lots of people listen to it, because I get lots of complaints about they were loving it, and then the advert came on, and it's like, oh, yeah, I know, what can we do? But so we've somehow got to, there's no way. So I try to leave a big gap at the very end, and then it sort of dies away, and then the advert comes on a bit later. But don't tell Spotify. But it's a really difficult one. I love it. I listen to it a lot to get to sleep. Not just my own. There's loads and loads of other sort of sounds and natural sounds I find easier to sleep to. I don't know. David may know more, but I feel it's just not talked about as much. But I think it's still much needed.
Yeah, it's funny the mention of the ASMR thing, because I've had similar comments when I've been doing live listening sessions. So actually I think it was 2020, 2021, I actually have an album on my Bandcamp called Underwater Sounds ASMR version or something. So I made an album specifically of these because I think the technology and the way I'm recording is actually quite similar to that very close mic'd, you hear all the nuances of and all the lip smacks and all that stuff of I don't know, ASMR recording. But this is it's a very similar approach when you're recording underwater. The hydrophone has to be quite close to the subject, and there's this very intimate kind of connection with something that you wouldn't ever be that close. Like, I think that's part of the fascination with ASMR. You'd never listen a centimeter away from someone's face. It's just weird in real life. But then to also kind of weird to be recording, freshwater snails from a few millimeters away. And yeah, there's something about that crunching and grinding and all those sort of sounds, and again the plants and all their pops and clicks. And I thought, well, I have to just make an ASMR album with this. So I did put together a few 10-15 minute sort of sections of which can be looped, obviously. So yeah, I don't know where it's going. I don't know where it's going though. That was the second half of the question, wasn't it? Right. I've no idea.
No worries. Thank you so much for those answers. Now, we've probably got time for one more, and we've got another question in the chat as well. We've also got an invitation for you, Fergus, to go down to the South Downs, but we'll pass it on offline so you can kind of chase it up after. We'll finish up with the final question for all of you. Sally has asked about good tools for creating audio content and podcasts. So any tips for creating that content and exactly what you need to be able to create it as well?
I'm happy to go. I use very simple kits. I use a Zoom H5, which is a brilliant portable studio with a decent wind jammer on it. Dead cat. It's great. You can put a couple of extra microphones on it if you want to, and sometimes I'm able to put some lapel mics on guests and things like that. So that's really, it's not that expensive, and I managed to buy it before the mad rush at the beginning of lockdown. So although it's very battered, waterlogged, and probably not, it's still functioning great though. And so that's the main piece of kit I use. In terms of software, if you're just starting out, I really like Audacity. I know lots of people don't, but it's really basic, free, downloadable, simple to use, drag and drop. It's very, very easy to edit a bit of recording that you've done and add some basic effects to it. So there are lots and lots and lots and much more, and I am lucky that I have producers to correct all my errors. But for just starting out, it gave me a lot of confidence, and yeah, it's free, so you can mess about with it without sort of without this horrible sort of hole in your bank balance. So yeah, those are the two things that I would suggest.
I'll just chip in as well. I agreed. I mean, I use a lot of the Zoom F series equipment. I have some F3s, which are tiny little. These little, got one right here, little pocket kind of size recorder that you can attach a few mics to, or an F8 if I'm doing something bigger. You don't need to have wildly complicated equipment. The main thing I use is a little Sony M10. That's another little pocket recorder. Unfortunately, can't buy them anymore, but there's newer equivalents, and that just travels around with me all the time. It's super important to have a good wind muff on it, because otherwise when you get outside, it's just audio is going to be ruined. So yeah. I use stuff by Bumblebee Industries, which is fantastic, and software wise to edit, Audacity's great. I use that a lot when I'm doing school projects because it's free and it's easy to install. I typically use Reaper now, which again is actually very, very low cost and free for like 90 days, I think it is. I don't really use a lot of. I used to work in the music studios in Newcastle Studio. We had a lot of gear there. There's a lot of stuff, and it's great to have that stuff and to use it and have all the racks of plugins and hardware. But in my day-to-day audio making, I'll just use Reaper a couple of, and making sure I have nice recordings, and maybe just some really subtle use of equalization, so just to balance the frequencies a little bit.
Yeah, from my perspective, I don't usually do the sort of high quality sound recordings. I find those and bring them in. I have used a Zoom H1. If I'm talking to somebody, if I find someone and I'm not kind of prepared, I will just use my iPhone, because the quality is amazing sometimes. And I edit on GarageBand. I'm an Apple person, and GarageBand again is very good. And this is something actually that I would like to use Kren for, is precisely having sort of workshops about how to do recordings like this. I think this is exactly what this network could be used for. It's the kind of thing we're talking about at the moment, and getting this sort of expertise and spreading it around. I think it would be really useful, actually. Yeah, because I'm not very techy, so knowing what you two are using is useful to me.
No, amazing, thank you. Yeah, we use GarageBand usually as well whenever we're editing our podcast as well. And yeah, we have a little Rode mic that we hook up to my partner's iPhone and go through that. So that's kind of been how we do it as well. Yeah, I think it's nice and it is a lot more accessible. You don't actually need too much high-tech kit to actually get into something like audio content. So it is, it's quite nice. It's yeah, it can be fairly easy to get started. But we have run out of time there. So thank you so much for all three of you for coming along and for answering those questions. Thank you so much for everybody in the audience for getting involved. And hopefully you have enjoyed it. And hopefully you enjoy the rest of the last afternoon of Communicate Conference. So thank you so much, everyone, and see you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much. Yeah, cheers.
Bye.